Okay, we are live. Welcome to the stream, everyone. We've got a really fun locals tournament for y'all out there. This one will be in Joey-Pegasus format, which is, well, it's so I'm not the biggest fan of this format. I've said that in the past. But I do think it's a really cool format. It's like very, very fast paced. It's like a faster version of Android. And a lot of people do enjoy that style of gameplay. And there are some cool decks that do arise. So I do think it will be a fun locals event. We've got 10 players playing. And it should be a lot of fun. Ben also says, can't wait to see if I do better in this tournament than in the Silly Snake tournament. I say go for it. I'm rooting for you too. I think the best thing is like just constantly improving and going into it with that mindset. So, as long as you like look at your games from the last week and, learn from that and then just keep getting better and better, then, I think that's the best path forward. So, that's sort of my philosophy whenever I'm like in a tournament or things like that. But I hope that you make it past round one and get even to the finals and beyond, maybe. So, but I hope you enjoy it above all. No matter how far you make it, as long as we're all having fun, that is the best thing here. And it looks like Ratos has joined. I'll join the general chat there. And I think that's the last person we were waiting on here. So I'm gonna get the local started here. Let's just see. Yep. Okay. Because it is 7:01, and I said we'd start at 7. And we've got enough people where it's like, good enough to start. So we're just going to dive into the game now, and there we go. So we've got the tournament all set up. We've got the challenge here as well for the tournament, so we get to see which matches are going where. And we got some fun opening games to go through here. So I lost connection on DB, but we're going to hope that the stream did not lose connection. I've been having a tough couple weeks with that. But I was I did a hard reset on my router, and did things like that. So hopefully we are a bit better this time. So let's hope that is the case. But we're going to wait and see when people get in here and host games because the challenge is up. So there'll be a couple games to watch and see. So it should be a lot of fun here. Just to make sure, I'm going to go to watch. I don't think there are any games. Yeah, no games from the locals yet, but there should be some soon. So, it'll be a blast to watch. And I'm excited to see what happens. So we got History of YJ1 hosting for food there. We also have no one else hosting yet. I hope that people remember to leave watching open for everyone. No watch passwords and things like that, just so we can dive in to whatever games are going on. So it seems like History of YJ1 versus Food, Raga Drago, is going to be going on there. And we'll have to see what happens here. Looks like everyone else is sort of getting ready to go there. So this should be a lot of fun. It's always cool seeing some of the decks in this format pop off because there are some interesting things you can do in this format. Like Android format is very much a one deck format, although the results of the recent Android tournament, there have been, well, mainly one big standout for like a unique deck that actually made it to Top Cut, which is really cool to see. So, there is some experimentation going on in Android, but most of the time you just see this one deck topping, and that's the sort of B spellcaster list. And that list is definitely still strong in Joey-Pegasus format, but the introduction of double Graceful Charity does mean that some a bit more inconsistent options do have the chance to do well as well. So you do get to see that in this format too. So it does lead to a wider variety of decks in the meta. But we're going to see Raga Drago open up with a Witch and then a Painful. So this is a pretty good opener from them. They must have top decked the Painful here because generally you just fire to the Painful right away to set up your plays. But they're going to send the 3 hand rips, a Charity, and a Pot of Greed, which may seem, I don't know. I feel like you could just send double Charity maybe, but maybe they've got the other Charity in hand and they just held it for the Serpent. But if they were waiting for Serpent, why not add Serpent to hand off the Witch? I don't know how I feel about that, but I think we don't know the hand, so there are situations where that was the right send there. But it looks like an elf is coming down here to potentially hit over that tomato, and it will indeed do that. So tomato's gone. History of YJ1 will get a search here. Could be something like a Sangan or a Witch. Could be just another tomato to keep up board presence. A lot of different options, and it will indeed be another tomato there. Raga Drago is going to set another card, pass back to History of YJ1 here. And, you know, we're doing the dance. We're going back and forth. As provided one, we'll switch that to tomato to defense there, set another card. And will they set a back row as well? Okay, it looks like they're going to BRB. So, okay. Well, if they're doing that, then let's dive into another game then. Yeah, hopefully that really does not take too long. We've got PJ Darkness versus Dump Truck and Chef Steph Curry. Oh, we've actually got a bunch of games here. Actually, I want to dive into the Ben Labs versus Helios Triumph one, because both these players are on interesting decks. And Ben also hopped in the chat, so I figure it would be cool to sort of jump into their game and see how it's going. But some interesting gameplay going on here. We see a Delinquent Duo already fired, so that hit an MST and a Reborn, or it hit an MST and an Elf, and Helios Triumph Reborned back the Elf. And it looks like Helios Triumph likely drew the Thunder Dragon, or at least activated on their turn. So they pitched the Thunder Dragon, add 2 more Thunder Dragons to hand. So they've got 2 double Thunder Dragon in hand, 2 unknowns. Ben Labs has the Witch searching out a monster from deck here. So it could be something like Bazoo, could be something like Rat. Rat is very interesting. Could potentially go into something like Hayabusa, which is a card in this format that does go into OTKs. Could also just go into things like Dream Clown or Nimble Mamanga. So different Rat Box stuff is also available to the Giant Rat deck. It looks like they've already got a Bazoo, so they're going to go for that. Banish the Witch and the Duo to get over that Gemini Elf there. One of the most powerful things about Bazoo in this format, that doesn't just have to banish monsters, it can banish anything from grave. Same with Kaiku and Skull Lair as well. So that makes Bazoo very powerful here. Unfortunately, now Ben Labs' graveyard is empty, but there are ways to set up more cards in grave for the Bazoo. And the Bazoo does gain the attack boost until the end of the next turn. So, you know, that Bazoo likely will be sticking around for a little bit. And we'll have to see what Helios Triumph actually does here to combat that. We know about the double Thunder Dragon in hand, so 2 of those cards are basically bricks. We can go for Change of Heart, and Change of Heart can actually turn those Thunder Dragons into non-bricks, because it turns Change of Heart into a removal tool. Now, there is a possibility for Helios Triumph to banish with the Bazoo, buff it up even further, attack in, and then tribute over the Bazoo there to bring on a Thunder Dragon. It looks like they will indeed do that there. So, they will go for that. And, yeah, so that'll buff the Bazoo up to 3,100, get in for a fair bit of damage if Ben Labs doesn't have a way to deal with that. Yeah, it's a bit of a scary spot to be in for Ben Labs. They're going to hit in, and now Helios Triumph main 2. They're going to indeed tribute over the Bazoo for a Thunder Dragon normal summoned. That's interesting. You could potentially set it here as well. But the argument is, like, you're taking minimal damage here either way, no matter what Ben Labs have to beat over that, and you don't want to play into, like, Knock, I guess. So that makes sense. Raigeki coming down for the Thunder Dragon. Seems like Ben Labs doesn't really have a good way to deal with that in hand, and they're going to bring out a Giant Rat attack in for 1,400 here. So, you know, I think Ben Labs is still in a very good position despite being lower on life points here. Helios Triumph is down to effectively 3 cards in hand because one of them is a Thunder Dragon. And so it's a bit rough for them in case they don't have a way to deal with that Rat. Rat is a very gummy monster on board. A lot of things it can potentially go into that could be good for Ben Labs to get out. So a bit tricky for Helios trying to deal with here, and they'll have to think about what exactly to do. They've got a Bazoo of their own, so they can get in a fair bit more damage here. They are going to go for the Bazoo effect. And we'll have to see how much they banish here. They could banish everything. But then they don't have monsters in grave or anything in grave, so looks like they are indeed going to do that. My throat's parched. The Rat will be able to bring out something else from deck here. So could bring out another Rat, could bring out Hayabusa, could bring out Dream Clown. A lot of different options here that could be very powerful for Ben Labs to bring out. So we'll have to see exactly what they go into here. But either way, like, they are lower on life points, but they're in a good position. And that is very important in this format. They're going to bring out the Dream Clown. Helios Triumph's just going to pass back, and now Ben Labs has a chance to pop the Bazoo with the Dream Clown, bring out another monster, attack in for more damage. Raigeki is, oh, that was Ben Labs used the Raigeki. Okay, so Raigeki still does exist for Helios Triumph here. And Ben Labs is going to switch the Clown to defense, pop the Bazoo, and get in with the Elf. So this is going to be pretty good, getting in more damage and also building a board that's somewhat resilient to damage. If Snatch Steal is in the works for Helios Trident, you still have protection through Dream Clown. If Fisher is in the works, then Fisher will pop Dream Clown, and not the Elf. So this is still pretty good. Helios Trident will bring out a Witch to hit over the Dream Clown. Oh, they're also going for card destruction to dig a bit deeper into their deck as well. Hitting a Serpent, though, is never what you want to see with that card destruction, but luckily for Helios Trident, those two cards that they have are also kind of cards you want to pitch off card destruction as well. So they are going to draw 2, see if that gets them anywhere further in this situation. They drew Raigeki, so that is really good for them. But they likely don't really have any way to extend further into a lethal push here, because Reborn is gone, and there isn't much else that can actually push for that in this format. And Ben Labs is actually going to go for the Skull Lair because they are very low on life points, so they do just need to pop that Witch while they can. And, there's only room in their graveyard for 1 pop, but this does make sense because, Helios Trident's probably just going to search out Kaiku off the Witch anyways. So that'll shut down Skull Lair anyways if you don't have a way to deal with it. So Ben Labs is using the removal that they have to deal with the Witch. And this does get Helios Trident to search, but depending on what Ben Labs has in hand and on field, that might not really matter that much. But let's see what Helios Trident actually searches out with the Witch of the Black Forest here. There are a couple potential options that they could go for. And let's see, what did they... Okay, so Ben Labs banished a bunch of monsters as well, keeping the Raigeki in grave, which may signal that they are on Magician of Faith. It could also signal that they're trying to bluff that they're on Magician of Faith and have Helios try and play around that for longer. But what will Helios try and get? They're going to get a Kaiku indeed to shut off the Skull Lair there. So it is good to know about, good to sort of keep in mind that Helios Trident has it in hand. But we'll have to see what Ben Labs does here. Very tricky spot to be in. They're going to go for Painful. Painful is really good. You get a way to potentially get the Kaiku, out of the picture. You get more cards engraved for your Skull Lair as well. So this is very, very good for Ben Labs here. Sending Jar Jar. Will they send more jars as well? That remains to be seen. Comfy. Yep, Comfy is pretty good here as well. And let's see. No Forceful's been used up. They're going to send Jinzo as well. Just have that in graveyard as an option potentially. Or just maybe they've got ways to bring it out on field too. And also Forceful there. So those are 5 good sends, I think. And we'll have to see what exactly Helios Trident picks from these 5. Now, Helios Trident could pick a low impact card like Jar of Greed. They also could just pick the Jinzo, being afraid that Ben Labs has like Call of the Haunted engrave. But Call of the Haunted sort of messes up with Jinzo anyways, because you can just bring out a tribute monster for the Jinzo. So they're going to pick the Jar, which is sort of the low impact option to give Ben Labs. It gets a card engraved for Ben Labs, but if Ben Labs doesn't have a way to deal with the Kaiku, then that's still an issue for them. But I think this was a good Painful. Ben Labs just going to set 1. And will they set the Jar? Will they pass? They are going to set 1. That could be the Jar. They're going to set 2, actually. So one of those is Jar, but Helios Trident does not know which is which. Now, Harpies is in this format, so it is something to consider here. But it is... maybe Ben Labs has a way to deal with that. Maybe something like Imperial Order set. Also, Jar of Greed can sort of play around Harpies a little bit. So there's that too. And it looks like Helios Trident's just going to set 1 and pass. That will, sort of bait an MST there. And hitting an IO is super, super good there. So it also gets another card engraved. This could be really bad for Helios Trident. And Ben Labs is going to go for another Jar of Greed as well, drawing deeper into the deck. So this is looking pretty good for them. They're going to bring out a Kaiku of their own to get in for 1800 damage, banish 2 cards from grave. Also a Faith here. Faith is really good. You have a lot of different options here. You could go for something like a Forceful Sentry, potentially. And Forceful could shuffle back the Kaiku that you know about in Helios Trident's hand. And they are going to go for the Forceful there. Send back a card. And it's very likely going to be the Kaiku, but there are some possibilities where you don't send back Kaiku. Depends on what the other card is. And also depends on what Ben Lab's other cards are here as well. So Ben Labs is thinking... Oh, it looks like they picked the Kaiku. Okay. So you're leaving the Darkle. I think that makes sense because, again, Kaiku shuts down your Skull Lair, and that's really disastrous for you. So if they Darkhold this board, it's unfortunate, but you got in a fair amount of damage. You also get to banish 2 from the grave. So yeah, it looks like they might be... I mean, it's at the point where like nothing has changed here. So I personally allow like that sort of Kaiku banishing. Like if you go to main 2 and you're like, oh damn, I forgot to do Kaiku, I personally allow it. but I definitely see people like not doing it. Like it just depends on how much of a stickler for the rules you are. And you know, owning up to the mistake is also respectable because like that way you remember for the future too. So yeah, exactly. As Ben Lab says in chat, that they'll learn from it, and I think that's a really like a good attitude to have when playing these games. So yeah, something else that I've noticed here, something that I do often, is that there's a serpent in both players' graveyard that no one has added back. So that is good to keep in mind. Looks like no other games have actually wrapped up. Thought I saw something there that might have indicated that. But Kaiku's coming down. That will be met with a Torrential Tribute here. Torrential being a very good trade for that Kaiku because it is in a very sort of like top deck heavy situation. Whoever draws into the aggression first is likely going to win. Graceful is also another way to sort of go for that because you're drawing into your deck deeper, drawing into the aggression, being able to commit that aggression and attacking in. And if a Bazoo is drawn after that Graceful, then that will just be the end of the game. Pitching a Io and a Mamanga. Pitching Mamanga is kind of interesting there because Mamanga does represent damage, but so does Rat. So yeah, it's a misclick. Yeah, misclicks like there's a difference between misclicks and forgetting. So yeah, misclicks should definitely be like, especially because Ben Labs like flipped it up immediately, and this is the correct choice that you make. So yeah, this was definitely fine. And that Rat's going to hit in for 14. Drop Helios Shrine down to 900. A lot of ways to lose from this position. And yeah, Helios Shrine will indeed add the Serpent there. Finally remembering. And again, you know, this is something that I've forgotten about a lot as well. Very, very important to remember. But yeah, it's just something that like is so easy to forget in formats like this because Serpent is a much lower impact card than you get in later formats like Goat, for instance. So it is good to keep in mind. Now, tomatoes coming down here. Helios Shrine have not used up any tomatoes, and Ben Labs has actually used up one rat already. So Ben Labs is a little bit behind in the recruiter race here, but they can potentially go into something like a Mamanga potentially to gain back life, which is very, very important here. Also deck thin a little bit. They could also just go through the other rats as well, just deck thin even further, because there are a lot of things that potentially just win them the game here. So the tomatoes going to attack into the rat yet again, and we'll have to see what the rat brings out. It does bring out a Mamanga here, so that is very good to know about. And what will Helios Shrine go into? They've got a couple options. They can go into another tomato, and they will indeed do that. Witch is gone. Sangan's not gone, but you don't want to do this Sangan there. Oh, going for the Mirror Force on the last tomato. That is a bold play in terms of just, you know, holding that for a while. But I do respect it, and that will just be the end of the game there for the Serpent. Was the last card in hand. But very, very good game one, it looked like, and both players were on some very interesting stuff there. Thunder Dragon is a card that does see play in this format because, you know, you've got double Graceful available, so it is a good deck thinner, plus discard engine for that. And yeah, there's some cool stuff going on there. Let's check in on Chef Steph Curry and Efkin Azen Dean. And let's see how this game is going here. It looks like Dean won the first game. And ooh, this is a bit of a tough spot for Steph Curry, but honestly, they're still in a relatively winning position. Getting Dean down to 1,600 life points is a very precarious spot for Dean to be in. Even though they are getting aggressive this turn, the Kaiku will go back to Steph Curry here, and the Kaiku does still check the Bazoo. So, oh, that's a bit interesting. I think maybe the choice would have been, I mean, it's kind of tricky, but I think, honestly, like, change of hearting the Elf, bringing out Bazoo, attacking Elf over Kaiku, and then attacking in for 16, and then banishing in main 2 might have actually been the better move here, because then your Bazoo is online for longer. But Steph Curry could also just have ways to deal with the Bazoo naturally. Duo is brutal here for Dean. Pitching those last two cards from hand, hitting a Kaiku and a Reborn. Very good cards to hit, and then just passing back because now Dean cannot banish with the Bazoo there. So the Bazoo will drop down to 1,600 again. And yeah, they're just going to switch to defense. They cannot deal with that Kaiku there. And very, very intense stuff here. Let me just check that. Okay, the comments were off, so sorry about that. Yeah, sorry about that. I just missed the comments because I check them on my phone, and sometimes they come through, sometimes they don't. So very, very sorry about that. But yeah, CSS, how is Muka Muka control in this format? And yeah, it's really not too good here. But you do have multiple Graceful. Graceful isn't really a +1, so it's kind of awkward there. But if you go through things like Serpent, then you can get more hand advantage. But yeah, Muka is unfortunately not really that good here. Since Android, it's like not the best. But yeah, Tinkerick, hopefully you'll be able to make it to one of these. Because they're always fun. But no worries about missing a couple here or there. Yeah, and Exodia actually is something that I tried when experimenting with this format initially. Because it is somewhat decent. You've got double Graceful, so you go through your deck pretty quickly. And if you can get your Exodia pieces to hand before your opponent can get into their hand rips, then that's pretty good. Exodia is in an awkward spot in any of these formats with the hand rips, because if you hit a head, you're just like dead. That's a cool rhyme. But yeah, it's a bit of a tough sort of thing to be in. But yeah. So, okay, that covers the comments that I missed. Hopefully this will actually update me more as I'm going through. Like, yeah, I need to really get a second monitor. And then once I get a second monitor, I can like have the chat on one side, have my computer on another, instead of just relying on my phone. Because my phone is not the most reliable option for that sort of thing. They're going to pitch a Serpent and a Kaiku there. Go for a Snatch Deal on the Bazoo, but that will get met with an MST. MST, popping one of the high priority targets in this format. The interesting thing about MST in this format is, like, you could just blind snipe back row. That is something that MST is used for, but oftentimes you want to save it for certain high impact targets. Snatch Deal is one of them. Imperial Order is another. Premature Burial isn't really played that much in this format, so that's not really another one. But Skull Lair is definitely a high impact target to hit off MST. So it's kind of cool. Like, you've got to often decide, like, what that balance is. Like, do you save your MSTs for the big stuff, or do you use your MSTs aggressively to get even more aggressive? This is a tough spot for Dean to be in, because they'll likely be taking more damage here with the Bazoo. So we have to see what actually Chef Steph Curry does here, because they got a bunch of different options. The Undertaler 587, did Curry banish spells for Bazoo effect? I thought it was only monsters. It is only monsters after a certain point in the game's history. Initially, when Labyrinth Nightmare first came out, there was a mistranslation, and basically Bazoo, Skull Lair, and Kaiku the Ghost Destroyer could all banish any card from the graveyard. And because when we go back to these retro formats, we use the original rulings at the time, and that was the original way these cards were played. That is how we are ruling it for these formats. So you did see that correctly, but Steph Curry did do a legal play in this format. So yeah, it's one of the quirks of this format. Like, basically any format from Android to Yada is actually where it stops. So basically Android to Fiber are the formats where you can actually do that. And they're actually also the formats where you can activate quick play spells that turn their set, which also is sort of a weird rulings quirk of this time period. But this is looking really good for Steph Curry. Dean will add back a Magician of Faith, which can get back some powerful spells from Grave. But, Steph Curry, all they need to do is attack indirectly once, and that is the end of the game. Duster is going to be really good here, though. Duster is going to clear the pre-mat, pop the Kaiku. Now they can set the Magician of Faith without fear. And if Steph Curry doesn't have another monster here, things could get somewhat rough, but they've got the Kaiku, and that will be the end of the game here. So yeah, they don't even need to banish with Bazoo, but they can if they want to. So yeah, it's all over here. No spells that can really save Dean from this predicament here. But very, very intense gameplay there. And it's interesting too, because like Dean went through double Graceful. Curry, they went through double Graceful as well. So both players went through double Graceful. But it still was a back and forth game. So double Graceful, I'm not the biggest fan of it. I think that it can lead to more non-games than games where it's back and forth. But it is something that, like, it's not going to be the end of the world in a lot of cases. Oh, it looks like one match wrapped up. It seemed like PJ Darkness lost to Dump Truck there. So I'll put that in here. Dump Truck moving on. Dump Truck is one of the players with the most wins in locals. So that is pretty exciting to see here. Let's dive back into History of YGO1 versus Rago Drago. And it looks like Rago Drago managed to take game one. But things are looking up for History of YGO1 in this game for sure. Yeah, that is yep, and that's just going to be the end of the game there. So, I mean, that can happen sometimes. There are very explosive combos in this format. So, definitely an interesting end to that game there. But let's dive into a game that's actually currently going on with Ben Labs versus Helios Trident. And it looks like Helios Trident has got the upper hand here as well. This isn't quite lethal, but this is a lot of damage there. Okay, it looks like they cleared some Momongas. So the Momongas putting in work, deck thinning a bit, gaining life. Momongas are a very cool tech in a lot of decks around this time period. Like you see in the Android format tournament that we held this month, a lot of people were testing out Momonga in the deck. And it's not a bad option. Deck thin to gain you life. I do think that going for the full rat package is maybe like, I mean, the rat package isn't terrible. Like, the thing about the rat package is that, like, you're basically playing it over a tomato package, and tomatoes generally do a little bit better in these formats because they can search out Sangan, they can search out Witch, they can also search out Cannon Soldier, which generally gets over whatever rat is bringing out once it's gone through rats. So, like, there are mixed opinions on that. Now, you could also potentially play a deck playing both tomatoes and rats, and that would also be a very interesting deck to experiment with because it keeps your field presence up, and field presence is very important in Android format. But I haven't really seen as many people experimenting with that side of the squirrel package, so it would be cool to see what happens there. But it looks like this might be the end of the game. Yep, Serpent getting popped and no traps being able to be activated, but Scapegoat does exist in this format. So there is a possibility to Scapegoat here to live. But yeah, unfortunately, it looks like that will be the end of the game. Very cool stuff. And, it's kind of interesting. We've been diving in at the end of these games here, and we've been seeing these big boards of just, so many monsters on the field. And that can happen in this format. You've got double Graceful. Graceful draws you in a lot of aggression. You've got the big beaters being at the centerpiece of many decks in this format. So it's just interesting to sort of see. Pot of Greed coming down here from Dean. That's going to be pretty good. Relatively, in terms of cards that do things, like both players are relatively even at this point. Despite, Dean having 3 tokens that are going to block off things for a while from Curry's side of thing. But like relatively things are even. Now, this Painful will definitely shift the balance on that potentially. Momonga looks like an oyster in low-res screens like the GBA. Oh, that's very funny. Yeah, very different from what the art actually looks like. But maybe foreshadowing sprite stuff with like Nimble Angler and things like that. More nautical themes. PJ said got smoked in under 15 minutes. Yeah, that happens in this format. Yeah, it's just like, I mean, this format, like, one of the reasons why I'm not the biggest fan of this format is because you just have these games that just are so quick, so aggressive, that you really can't do anything with. You just get, like, super blown out. But it is definitely a thing that appeals to certain people. Like, I'm not going to say that this format is terrible for everyone. Like, there are definitely people who like this format a lot. I'm not the hugest fan of it, but I do think that it's really cool, and I'm happy to show it off and provide a place where people can play it. Yeah, Sacker gets sacked. That's really the name of the game, CS. And it's a game that not everyone likes to play, but it can be interesting at least. Now, Steph Curry gave Dean the Graceful. I think that makes sense because if you've only got 2 cards in hand, they're both very valuable. You kind of want to go for this. Unfortunately, the Serpent will get pitched off the Graceful, so that's going to be good value there. Also, a Jinzo getting pitched there. If Dean has any revival for that Jinzo, that's going to be pretty good. Harpy's coming down on the back row, but that's going to be a Scapegoat of Steph Curry's own, so they will be able to get tokens out here. Now, the risk is if Dean has, like, Raigeki, that's going to be annoying, but it looks like it's just a Bazoo. So Bazoo will be able to get over the Elf. Question is how much you banish here. I think that, honestly, you just banish 3. That's what I would do. Because, you've got so many cards in grave that's not really gonna matter. Ben also, I went to game 3 in my game. Oh, who won? Or it's just on game 3. Yeah, we actually caught games 1 and 2, and it seemed like very intense. Very, very cool games there. So good luck in game 3 if you're still playing it. And yeah, I think it's both of you are playing very interesting decks. I'll say that. I'm not sure if Helios Trident's deck has revealed its true form yet or not. But it is very interesting. And also, I think it's interesting what you've been doing with like going above 40 cards and playing the Momongas and rats. I think that does make sense because you don't want to draw into multiple rats or multiple Momongas, that is. But it's an interesting strategy that not many people are sort of trying out. A lot of people don't really try to go over 40. So I think it's definitely a valid thing to do and something that people don't experiment with nearly as often as they should. So I'm very curious to see how you do in the long run. But it looks like Curry's in a bit of an awkward spot. Now, the good thing for them is that Dean seems to not really have any other monsters, so they can't eat through these tokens faster than just like one attack per turn. But, you know, that Bazoo is going to be quite annoying if they can't deal with it, because Bazoo is a big beater, can get in for a lot of damage, and can represent some potentially scary aggressive plays if it's allowed to sit around for a while. So Curry is going to bring out this Kaiku attack over a token. And that will shut off the Bazoo from gaining again next turn if Dean doesn't have a way to deal with Curry's board. So we'll have to see what Dean does here. Now we know that things like Graceful are gone, so you don't really have those big draw engine cards that can get you really drawing into something to get out of this. But Snatcher will potentially take the Kaiku. Now that will get MST'd there. So Curry will be able to keep the Kaiku. And Change of Heart will get fired here. That's going to be quite unfortunate. But we do know that Jinzo is in grave. Oh, but Cannon Soldier is going to be a problem. So Cannon Soldier with everything here can clear the entire board, then tribute off the Kaiku and tribute off, yeah, probably 2 tokens. So you tribute off the Kaiku and 2 tokens. So that's just 1,500 damage this turn, because if you tribute off the whole board, that's 2,500, but then Curry gets to respond next turn, basically. So yeah, it's still very, very good for Dean. Don't get me wrong, but it is going all in. So depending on what Curry has in hand, things can get a little bit awkward here. So that will tribute off the Kaiku there, dealing 5 to Curry. Now, will they tribute off the tokens as well? I think you just do. It looks like they're going to keep them around to play a bit defensively. But realistically, the way that Curry gets back into this from this position is if they like have a board wipe here to wipe out your entire board. Or, you know, they draw like a tomato, summon a tomato, crash into canceled, or crash into a token, right? Then you've still got only 1 token left. And it's like, do you care about that 1 token? Probably not, right? So I feel like you don't necessarily need to keep the tokens around, because you're just basically losing damage. Statue will come down on the Bazoo here, and they will be able to deal a fair amount of damage to Dean here if they banish 3, go up to 3,400, and then attack over. Yeah, it's buffed already, but you can buff it again. So you can just keep doing it, basically, like, because it's 1 per turn. Oh, if you just tell me that you won. Okay, Pikachu won, so I can just put that in here. Yeah. So, yeah, you made it past around. Good work. So that's already an improvement from last time. And that's what you got to do. You got to try and, you know, keep improving. That's my philosophy. But very, very cool stuff for both players there. So congratulations. Yeah, so the Bazoo can buff itself again here. So you can go up to 3,400 because this is once per turn, and then the buff lasts until the end of your opponent's turn. So yeah, it looks like Curry is not going to do that here. I think that's fine. You know, you want to preserve cards in grave for later. But yeah, and then well, no, it's not a diss. It's not a diss CS. It's just because Ben all said earlier that they want to do better than the Silly Snake tournament. So that's why I'm saying that. It's not meant to be a diss. But yeah, it's just all about improvement, I think. So, yeah, this is an awkward spot for Steph Curry to be in, though, because that Snatch Shield's gaining Dean 1,000 life points every turn. And Dean is being able to wall up here quite impressively. They've got Serpent as well to continue to wall up. So, oh, Raigeki's going to be good, though. Raigeki's going to clear that board away. Hit a Tomato as well, so that's going to be pretty good. And the Bazoo is going to banish 3. A diss is like, it stands for like disrespect, so it's like an insult, kind of. But I was not insulting you. I was legitimately saying that it was an improvement. So, yeah, I generally do not like, you know, diss people, you know, because I think it's good to have a welcoming community and, you know, not like, one where I'm just like, oh, look at these, you know, plays and, blah, blah. I don't know, but, yeah, no, it was not meant to be a diss, so don't worry about that. But, yeah. So it looks like the Bazoo is getting in for some damage here, but if Curry can't get another monster here, this might be a little bit awkward. How many MSTs has Dean used up? They've used up 1 MST, 1 Duster, so there are 2 MSTs left in deck. So that could be pretty rough for Curry. Premat's coming down here. And oh, thanks, CS. Yeah. If I can help support the community any way I can, I'm happy to do so. But our pre-mat's going to bring out the Kaiku here, and this is a bit of insurance if Dean does draw an MST to clear the snatch, because the idea is if they do, then the Bazoo will go back to Dean, and then it can't banish again. Now, the issue with that is that if Curry buffs the Bazoo here, then the Bazoo will retain the buff when it goes back to Dean's side of the field. So that's a little bit awkward here. But you know, it is something that you kind of got to take a risk there, and at least the Kaiku will be able to banish things like the Jinzo from Grave, so that's pretty good too. But yeah, I try and generally not be about negativity. Like I've noticed, like watching some people, I'm not gonna name names about anyone, but I've noticed like some YouTubers are a bit more negative. And like I've never really enjoyed seeing that. I mean, it can be fun as like a guilty pleasure, but like I feel like long term it gets sort of grating. So I try and just be positive. And that's why like heavy storm seeing. Okay, wow, that is brutal. And that's potentially the end of the game here, because the Bazoo can buff up even further from beyond this point. So the snatch will go away and the Bazoo will still be at 2,500. And then if Dean banishes 3 more, then that does get it up over 3,200. So that will be the end of the game there. So yeah, that's a brutal heavy. I'm kind of shocked that they brought in heavy in addition to the Harpies, because a lot of people don't play heavy in this format. But yeah, it worked out for them. The one thing Curry might have been able to do here is if Curry had activated the Skull Lair like preemptively. But yeah, I mean, you would never do that really, because you wouldn't expect the heavy. And yeah, that was very, very good games there. Wow, good stuff. But yeah, very interesting. So that will be a game there. And I believe that was Curry's first locals too. So welcome to the local scene. And I hope that you enjoyed it, because that was a really, really good game. But yeah, I try and just host as many of these tournaments for these older formats as I can, especially because not many people host in these in these specific formats here. So, okay, it looks like I think did Blah win against? Okay, Blah did win against Food, so I'll put that in as well. So there we go. Yeah, because I saw that game going on there. But yeah, so. And again, like, this is not to, like, cast shade on anyone out in the world, because I don't want to, like, cast shade. Like, if you enjoy that sort of content, you know, then definitely enjoy it. Like, don't let me tell you what to enjoy or not to enjoy. And if that's your style of content, too, like, I'm not trying to, you know, come out against that. I'm just trying to offer a more positive alternative if people want that. Or not even an alternative, but just, like, a more positive voice out in the world there, because I think just the more positive voices we have, the better things are. So yeah, but that's just me. But we got an interesting game state here. We got the Rat versus a Tomato, and the Rat actually did wall up against the Tomato. That's one of the nice things about Rat, is that it actually can wall up against a Recruiter and preserve your Recruiter in the Recruiter War, because a big dynamic in formats like this is where you have like Tomatoes crashing into each other, or just any of the 1,400 elemental Recruiters crashing into each other. But here Rat sort of rebuffs that first attack, and now you've got the full Recruiter line to actually go through. So yeah, that's one of the benefits for playing Rat. And wow, Ben Lobs is going to get really aggressive here, going all in. 1,800 plus 14 plus 14. That is a lot of damage. It's 4,600, I believe. So just starting that clock off early. It's not quite a clock, because you know, it's not like Aratus is at immediate threat of death, but this is really scary for Aratus here. So there are ways they can get around it. I mean, they've got a full hand here, and Tomato is annoying to deal with, but Ben Laps has gotten a major damage lead here. And that is very important in Joey-Pegasus when there is so much draw power into your power cards. So, you know, big damage pushes can come from everywhere. And that's why it's a really tricky format, I think, to get good at. And because it's just like you've got to recontextualize your pace of play, I think. But that's just like my opinion on how the pacing goes. I'm not the best at like this format specifically. I'm generally not the best at like formats that are more tempo based, because I've always been a more control player. So I really like formats like, Critter, Yada, etc., where there is more of a control-lier grind game, where card advantage matters a lot more, things like that. But formats like this and formats like Vampire, I do struggle with a little bit more because it's just not the way I'm used to playing. And it's something that I'm trying to improve at. Like when I cover formats where it is much more tempo based, like I'm trying to get better at it. So, yeah, but it's something that I think we all can struggle with. And I think that everyone's going to have formats where they're better at or worse at. And it's good to like sort of keep in mind why you're better or worse at a certain format and maybe use that to try and like improve in the future. But yeah, I think that's also some of the fun of like Yu-Gi-Oh! Is that like we've got these different formats where like it's the same base game, but it plays at completely different speeds and in a completely different way. So I think that's really cool. This is actually something that like I've encountered again in exploring Amsterdam format, which is like what I'm calling AST Chaos. I'm not going to spend too much time in AST Chaos. It's basically like 2 more videos, one of which is actually going up either tonight or tomorrow morning. But something that I've noticed is that like with the Reasoning Gate turbo decks, just spamming out Demox left and right, you really don't have time to actually set up a more controlling game plan. Like, for instance, I was testing the Night Assailant loops with, like, Raigeki Break and things like that, because Night Assailant can get you back flip monsters from grave and things like that. And I've also come to the conclusion, like, decks like that are just too slow to really compete with the Reasoning Gate turbo decks. None of the Reasoning Gate turbo decks are invincible. They do have flaws. Things like Imperial Order are really, really rough for them. I mean, Imperial Order is rough for a lot of decks, but, like, especially the Reasoning Gate turbo decks. And there are some other flaws that you can point to as well, like going first, they can set up a board that can be formidable, but a certain number of power cards can just break through it, which is quite unfortunate. And yeah, so there are some interesting sort of things to keep in mind there. But I do think that that deck is probably the best deck in the room, and it's kind of funny too, because this is just a sneak peek of what's to come. Like basically after the Amsterdam format that I'm covering, I'm going to cover like a hypothetical ban list format because the August 2004 ban list was something that Konami put out there, or Upper Deck Entertainment at this time put out there. And they're basically like, these cards will get banned in October. But then when they got banned in October, the October list added a lot more things and changed around a lot more stuff. So I figure it'll be interesting to cover like the hypothetical format that would be made if, the August 2004 list was actually instituted. And just looking at it, like initially I was like, oh damn, like this is going to be a bit lower powered than full power chaos and stuff like that. But then looking at the hits, I noticed that the Reasoning Gate turbo deck with DMOC, with triple DMOC, it barely got hit. There are things like, Graceful Charity getting hit. And like, I mean, that's like Duo got hit, I guess, but like, yeah, basically everything that the deck wants to do is still there. And its biggest silver bullet, which is Imperial Order, got banned. So I think in that sort of hypothetical ban list format, the Reasoning Gate turbo deck is going to be tier 0, bar none. I think that that's just how it's going to turn out. I could be wrong. I haven't tested it yet. I will be testing it soon. But I'm not going to spend too much time in that format because it just is looking like Reasoning Gate turbo all the way. So Bazoo is going to hit into the Witch here. Now, Bazoo is weak to the Kaiku, which is unfortunate, but this does get in a little bit more damage. And, Outrageous is at a very, very low life point total. So at this point, Ben Labs might just be saying, my board is pretty resilient here. I'm just going to sort of, just get in damage where I can and hope to draw a power card to turn the game around. And I think that could potentially be a good strategy here. But Outrageous is going to use a Jar of Greed to draw deeper into their deck as well. So they're drawing more cards here. They do have to deal with that Momonga and the Bazoo. But the Bazoo is easy enough to deal with when you've got Kaiku on field. So it'll be interesting to see what actually happens here. And what they actually do in the face of this board. I mean, probably what they're going to do is just hit over the Bazoo, summon out something else, hit over the Momonga, right? Just to eat through what Ben Labs has got right now. And then hope that that's enough. Like, because then in the following turns, you've got a pretty good setup there. Snatch on the Bazoo is also a good option. This allows you to get really aggressive. However, there is the risk if Ben Labs does have like Harpy's Feather Duster that you get majorly blown out. However, if they have that anyways, then the Kaiku is dying here. And so, you're still losing a monster either way. But Yeah, it's a little bit awkward here if Ben Lobs does draw the Harpies. But you could figure, like, they probably don't have MST or Harpies, or else they would have used that on the Call of the Haunted the previous turn. So I think this does make sense. Okay, they did not gain the, yeah, you need to gain the 1,000 off Snatch Shield as well. That is another potential risk to this strategy here. Oh, they were probably also thinking, like, do I just go for Dark Hole here, summon an Elf attack in that way? Because then, you know, Ben Lobs doesn't gain the 1,000. I think this made sense. You just hold the Dark Hole and then you can get aggressive later with it. But yeah, it's a kind of awkward spot for Aratos to be in. Now, they are able to get in damage here, depending on what the set is, because rats are gone, Momongas are gone. So very likely that set is not going to do much here. But let's see. Oh, and another Kaiku as well. And it looks like they're just going to not even banish from their grave, just attack in with the Bazoo, playing around if the Harpies comes down. And it's a Serpent, which will be able to get banished by the Kaikus there. So this is looking pretty bad for Ben Labs. Again, there are plenty of things that sort of get them into a better spot here. But it is tough because they are dropping down to a very low life point total. And now they just really got to pray that their top deck is something good. Now, there are potential top decks that get them out of this. But, you know, those top decks are somewhat few and far between. They're going to gain the 1,000 here. Yeah, it could come up. But, you know, okay, they got a Bazoo of their own, so they can crash the Bazoos. But, yeah, that's just the end of the game there. Yeah, nothing you can do with that sort of top deck. So, quite unfortunate, but that is how it goes sometimes. And very, very interesting game one. And I think one that shows what makes this format unique. So, very, very cool to see. Rangers will get the game one, but there is still plenty of time for either player to win the games 2 and 3. Let's dive into another game going on here. Let's check out Danny versus History of YGO1. Let's also check to see if there's any other games that wrapped up. It looks like there are not. Yeah, it looks like the other ones are just waiting. So it looks like Danny won the first of the games in this match. But it's True Edge 1 to able to get some card advantage with the Jars of Greed, which are pretty good. Jar is one of the best cards in all of these sort of Android-adjacent formats because it baits out things like MST, baits out things like Harpies, gets a card in Grave, cycles, and getting cards in Grave is really good for like Bazoo and Skull Lair. So Jar is really, really good. Surprisingly so. You might look at Jar and think it's like very underpowered compared to a lot of the other things in this format, but I think the Jar is a sleeper hit of Android and by extension like Joey-Pegasus and things like that. Danny is going to choose to keep the Imperial Order up. One of the most devastating things about Imperial Order is that you get to choose when to drop it. So you can keep it up for a while and then just sort of go for your big spells later. But they're going to attack into the tomato there. That will get out a Sangan. Playing it a little bit safe to just sort of play around if you know, Danny has more removal. And Danny, not committing any other monsters to board is very interesting here. Okay, it looks like Jinzo's going to come down over the Sangan. So maybe they had the read that History of Y1 had the Jinzo in hand because they brought up the Sangan instead of another tomato. And doing that, you sort of play around things like, you know, Raigeki, or just ways to play spells after Io has been negated by Jinzo. So Sangan's going to search out a Serpent, which will then go into a Graceful Charity. So History of Y1 will be able to draw 3, pitch a Serpent, pitch another card. But you're getting that Serpent back later, so you get value off that. And this is just a very, very scary place for Danny to be in. Now, the normal summon has already been committed to, so at least you don't have to worry about them summoning out another monster to get in for a ton of damage that way. I mean, Reborn could still come down, but there aren't really too many good Reborn targets to really go for there. But History of Y1's thinking hard on the second card there, and they're going to send a Gemini Elf. Go for a Pot of Greed on top of that. So, you know, this is sort of where you get into the grosser parts of this format. Is if you go Graceful into Pot, into Graceful, into, you know, anything you want, basically. Then it is pretty rough. But we'll have to see what they do here from here. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting juncture to be at for them. I mean, the extent of what they do here might just be to attack over the Elf and go for that. It looks like they're going to go for a Snatch Steal on the Elf, getting in for a fair bit of damage here. But Danny will be gaining 1,000 in their standby phase. So, you know, this Elf is basically equating to 900 damage. I don't think this is terrible. It's just, I mean, it does put them on a 2-turn clock too, so that's something. if Danny, doesn't have any way to deal with this and they set one and History Wide One has like Raigeki or something, then that will be still a 2-turn clock. So, pretty good there. Yeah, Heliostar, exactly. Also the multiple hand rips too. So it's just kind of like, oof. And yeah, double graceful is always awkward. Like, I'm generally not the biggest fan of formats with double graceful, except for fiber. I really do like fiber because fiber actually has fiber charge, which resets the field and the deck. And so basically what happens is like the hand reps are a bit less good. Okay, it looks like Danny's going to go for the MST now. I wonder why they saved that there instead of just firing it. Oh, I guess because now you still have Elf. So if you've got a way to clear the Jinzo here, then you get to keep the Elf, and that's pretty good. So that makes sense. And it looks like Danny's got a Jinzo of their own, so very interesting. It looks like they're going to crash. I don't hate that, but also at the same time, it's a very precarious position to be in. Now, Io is still up, so History Wide One spells are still negated, so that's pretty good there. No, like, Monster Reborn to bring that to Jinzo. But if it's like Call the Haunted, then that's going to be quite unfortunate for Danny because Call can just bring back that Jinzo, and then History Wide One is back off to the races. So Danny's going to set one, pass back to History Wide One. Now, that set could potentially be a call of Danny's own to bring back their own Jinzo, which would be a very, very powerful play. Kaiku coming down here. Kaiku's going to be pretty good at ripping that Jinzo and the Elf out of the graveyard. But it looks like Danny does have a call here in main. I don't like call in main. I feel like you do call in battle phase because in main, History Wide One can just go for Raigeki or Fisher or whatever and just clear it, right? Change of Heart too, yeah. That's why you just go for it in battle. Like what are you playing around? There's nothing that can pop call in, like, there's no reason to go for call preemptively there. So I think that was a major misplay, and that actually might have cost Danny the game. It's debatable because next turn they would have just Change of Hearted the monster anyways. But yeah, I think that was a major misplay on Danny's part. But that happens in these games. Like, it's tough to actually, figure that sort of thing out. But yeah, we've got a Raytest versus Ben Lab still going on here. And it looks like it's early into the first, or maybe not early into the first game. It looks like a lot of stuff has happened here. So just figuring what happened, we had Painful into Painful into Pot fourth. I don't know what they sent off Painful. The graveyard's sort of like, I mean, maybe they sent Painful mid combo. I don't know. I don't know what happened there. But yeah, looks like Rat's getting out something. It looks like Tomato's getting out something. So they're going for the Recruiter War. They're going all in on the Recruiter War there. So they're getting Rat, they're getting Tomato, and you'll have to see what happens here. Looks like Clown is the pick for Ben Labs, and it looks like the Cannon Soldier is still left in deck, so Cannon Soldier will be able to beat over the Clown there. An argument to go for potentially like a Momonga there over the Clown, because basically if you go for Clown, and let's say Rachel doesn't have a monster beat over it, then they're getting out like maybe Witch or Sangan, and Witch or Sangan's kind of awkward because then you don't want to pop that with Clown, so it's a bit interesting. But I also get why you do that, because if you go for Momonga, then Erasus can bring out like Sangan, crash into Momonga there, get a search off Sangan, and go from there. So there are some weird things related to that. We see a Morphing Jar number 2, very interesting from Ben Labs here. So neat tech, can build a bunch of cards into the grave, which is cool. Maybe they're on a bit of a Morphing Jar strategy too, like a Smokescreen side, which would explain why they're on a higher than 40 deck count as well. Very, very cool stuff. Kaiku comes down here. They'll be able to hit over the set potentially. And it is a Morphing Jar number 2, so that will shuffle back the Kaiku. Won't shuffle back the Morphing Jar number 2 because that will be destroyed by this battle here. So, oh wait, maybe Morphing Jar number 2 is why the graveyard looks like this. Okay, that's probably what happens. Yeah. Yep. So it looks like Erasus was on a jar of their own, getting a Cyber Jar there. So yeah, now Ben Labs will have to deal with that. But the good thing about Cyber Jar is that you want to deal with it on your turn. So that way you have the priority to use whatever cards you get back from it. So Ben Labs is going to bring out this Momonga, hit into the Cyber Jar. Always sad to see Momonga go that way. But you know, it's a worthy sacrifice, depending on what happens here. Skull Lair will come down though, and Skull Lair will be able to banish 2. And the great thing about this is that you know, you've still got plenty of cards in grave for the other stuff. That is one of the flaws with Momonga and Giant Germ in this format, is that Skull Lair is so prevalent, and both of those monsters are level 2. So even if you bring out a bunch of them, then just having the easy Skull Lair pops is, you know, very good. And Raigeki's going to come down and hit over that Cyberjar there. I like holding the Raigeki. I think that was the correct play. It unfortunately got punished by the Skull Lair, but I think that was the correct play there. Skull Lair of Ben Labs' own is going to pop that Gemini Elf there. So they're going to get rid of a Momonga, what else are they getting rid of? A Jar. So it looks like probably no Shallow Graves in their deck if they're banishing these. A Painful and a Rat. So I think those are good sends. You don't necessarily want to bring back the Painful off of Faith. I think you could, yeah, no traps in Graves. So yeah, that's probably the right move. Now both players have to play around the Skull Lair, which is kind of interesting, but Kaiku is going to be really good against a Raitos Skull Lair there. Attack in for 18, banish 2, or not banish 2. Okay, that is, you generally want to banish the 2 because then, Raitos is going to have less than 2 monster pops if they clear the Kaiku. So yeah, a bit of a misplay there on Ben Love's part, but it does happen, you know, and you know, yeah, I mean, it happens, right? Like, you know, it just happened. Misplays are the name of the game. And I think it's ultimately fine. You know, it's just something to learn from in the future. So they're going to hit into a Serpent, pass back to a Raitos here. A Raitos will be able to add back that Serpent, get another monster set there. But this could be a little bit awkward for Raitos here because if that Serpent goes to grave and gets banished by the Kaiku, that's not going to be very good for them. So Raitos is going to do a bit of a think here. Think about exactly what to do. Bit of an awkward spot for sure. But we'll have to see what they actually go for here. Let's see what they do. So we know about the Serpent in hand. We don't know anything else in Raitos' hand here. The fact that they're thinking so long about this means that they probably don't have a Dark Hole or Raigeki. They might have a change of heart and are debating. Okay, they've got a Snatch Deal, so that's a similar sort of thing. So then they can snatch the Kaiku here, hit into the set. And yeah, it looks like they're going to chain the Skull Lair here to get rid of the Kaiku, prevent Raitos from actually taking control of that and potentially banishing cards from grave. I like that play. I think that's correct. It's something that a lot of people forget about. The Skull Lair can pop your own monsters, but it is very good to remember in cases just like this, where you do just not want to give your opponent that monster. And I think that is very, very heads-up play on Ben Labs' part. Ben Labs is going to set another monster here, pass back to, Raitos is setting another monster, passing back to Ben Labs. What will Ben Labs get? Or what will they do? I feel like that set monster is... Okay, Tomato coming down here. I will get Trap Hold instead of getting Skull Lair. I like the restraint in holding the Skull Lair for later, because Skull Lair is a little bit more flexible. Also, this gets another card in grave for the Skull Lair. So, for instance, if Ben Labs had banished 2 from Raitos' graveyard, that graveyard would have been back up to 8 now for 2 monster pops. So that's something good to keep in mind. And it looks like Ben Labs is just going to pass back to a Raitos here. Raitos is going to go for Pot of Greed on top of that. So things are looking up for a Raitos here. And what will they do into this board? Now, we got to think about what Ben Labs' 10 set might be. So we see that double Morphing Jar number 2 are gone. So it can't be Morphing Jar number 2 since that's semi-limited in this format. Could be a regular Morphing Jar. Could be a Cyber Jar. But it looks like it's a Magician of Faith instead. So Magician of Faith can get back any number of powerful spells right there. So a lot of good options. It looks like Raigeki is going to be the choice here. I think that makes sense. Oh, but Duo. Oh, Duo is going to rip that out of the hand. Brutal, brutal Duo there. Yeah, hitting a Cyberjar and a Raigeki. And things are not looking good for Ben Labs here. Now, there are some ways to potentially get out of this, but it's really, really tough after that Duo. Yeah, brutal Duo. And now things just spiral for Raitos here. If they can actually set that up, they're going to go for Painful on top of that. So now they get another powerful card. They fill up their graveyard even more for Skull Lair. So yeah, it's not looking good for Ben Labs here. But again, you know, this format's filled with very powerful cards. And it is good to keep that in mind. Top decks can always change the name of the game here. But it is very scary, and a lot of the good top decks that Ben Labs have are in the graveyard already. So very, very tricky situation to be in. And Rayo's going to send Jar Jar, Comfy, Forceful, and Sangan. Pretty good sense there. I believe a Jar is already banished. Yep, a Jar is already banished. So it looks like, Ben Labs is going to give Aratos the Comfy, which is a sign that they probably don't have a Magician of Faith set, or else you wouldn't give your opponent the Comfy off that. Yeah, I think Coffee is probably the right choice if you think that you're not really going to be getting a card back to hand here. It's going to be a Tomato. Oh, this is actually kind of interesting. So Tomato will get popped, and then you can search out like a Sangan or a Witch. Then Aratos can pop that with Skull Lair, Comfy the card out of hand. But if you get Serpent to hand, then you sort of get value off that. However, now you got the Serpent in hand. Aratos knows about it. And if you're setting that, then Aratos could just flip up their set, attack over the Serpent, and attack directly with the Kaiku. It looks like they're going to bring out a Tomato there. Choose to just play into the Skull Lair a little bit. I don't know about Aratos leaving the Tomato on field there. I feel like Oh, Jinzo's engraved. So yeah, that's fine. Yeah. The reason to pop the Tomato preemptively is if like, you're afraid of Jinzo, but Jinzo's engraved, so it doesn't matter here. And Aratos just going to let the Tomato hit over the Serpent. Doesn't matter there. And leaves the Tomato in attack mode. So that's something too. But Aratos might just pop the Tomato with the Skull Lair here. I guess another reason to use the Skull Lair is if you're worried about your opponent drawing MST. But if your opponent does draw MST, you can just like chain the Skull Lair to it. Like what happens is you activate Skull Lair, they go for MST, you chain Skull Lair to the MST because Skull Lair is not once per chain. So you can just keep banishing. But yeah, this is going to be pretty good for Aratos here. That Charity pitching a Serpent and pitching something else from hand too. But this is going to be a pretty big swing. I mean, look at the card advantage now. And it's brutal. It's rough here. But again, like this format can be built off of all this big swingy card advantage plays like this. And I mean, it's just a facet of the format that you got to play around. You got to play into. You got to accept when going into it. And yeah, it looks like they're going to pitch a Serpent and a Bazoo there. Not going for the more aggressive play there. Now, the question is, do they play into the back row, or do they just pop the Tomato with the Skull Lair? It looks like they're just going to bring out a Bazoo here. If that's a TT set on Ben Labs' part, then Ben Labs can TT the board away. But Aratos might have a way to play around that, given that they went for this play here in the first place. So we'll have to actually see what they do. I'm just checking. Okay, it looks like Danny won that game, I assume. Because Dump Truck is now hosting. So I'm going to just put that in. I think that's how it worked. But we'll have to see later. But I mean, that's what the chat is implying there. Looks like the Aratos is banishing 4 for the Tomato Pop there. And now they'll be able to get in for a ton of damage. This is a 2-turn clock because there's 4,300 damage. And Aratos can do the same thing next turn. So very, very tough spot to be in. MST on the other back row that's unknown too. So that is going to be brutal. Call the Honda is going to get chained. This can bring back the Jinzo, so that's something. But now the Bazoo can go for that. Yeah, honestly, there's the summon does happen before call's destroyed. Honestly, there's an argument to bringing back the it's just awkward. No matter what you do here is awkward because the Bazoo can get over the Jinzo no matter what. But there was an argument to like when the Skull Lair was no, because then you just chain Skull Lair to it again. So yeah, no matter what happened here, it was awkward. Yep, we can hear you. Welcome Blah to the stream. Yeah.
Yay.
So you're on very
The
loud.
worst.
You're on. I think I can lower you. Yeah, let's say something now.
Blah, 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 blah.
Okay, that's a bit better. It's maybe I'm just going to put it up to...
I raised my voice just to see how much you lowered me.
Okay, well, chat can let us know if it's too high, too low. It was definitely too high initially, but it might be too low now. But I've definitely been off on that in the past, so we'll see what chat says. But yeah, this is looking over for Ben Labs, unfortunately. But, that's how it goes in this format sometimes. Sometimes when the aggression it just snowballs out of control for one end, then you
It wasn't
just
even
can't
aggression.
recover. So, no. But that's how it
So
goes.
all 3 games.
It's not over. Exactly, Ben Labs. It's not over yet. There is still always a chance. It's not over until it's over. So that's a very good attitude to have, especially in a format like this. And unfortunately, that witch is going to, well, if you got Karibo in your deck, then you're still alive. But yeah, that is the right attitude to have, though. It's not over till it's over. And I think that, it's a good attitude in whatever format you play, I've definitely been in games where I thought it's been over. And then, yeah, they say I'm adding Karibo at some point. If you're playing an over 40 card deck, you might want to add Karibo, because if your idea is just to like have a thicker deck, so that way you're not like drawing into the things you want to search, then that could potentially be an option. So potentially a way forward in the future. But either way, again, what matters is, trying your best. That's what matters. Also, just trying always to improve and learn from what you did. And yeah, so I think that this was a great run for you. And yeah, I'm glad you made it further this time. Okay, CS says perfect volume. Okay, cool. Glad to hear it. So looks like Aratos is moving on to face Afghan Izn Dean. And it's interesting because we might be set up for another Dump Truck versus Aratos match. Oh, CS says you might be a little bit too loud, blah. So I'll put you down a little bit more. I'll put you down to 50. There we go. Yeah, let's dive in to Dump Truck versus Danny.
That was fun.
Yeah. Ben also says, I will do a deck profile of my deck that I used in Joey-Pegasus. Yeah, please do. Like, if you ever make videos on these formats, like, definitely let me know and I can promote them and stuff, because the more people making videos about these formats, the better, in my opinion. So yeah. But Skull Lair getting flipped up preemptively. So this sort of plays around some things. For instance, if there's like a Reborn on the Jinzo, but if there's Reborn on Jinzo, it doesn't really matter to flip the Skull Lair, but you never know what it will get flipped up. Yeah. Serpent getting added back there. That's pretty good. Jar getting flipped up as well. So this is filling up Dump Truck's graveyard even more, which is pretty good. Yeah, very similar. Yeah, Silly Snake and Joey-Pegasus are pretty similar, all things considered. There are some major changes, like Silly Snake is a bit more absurd with triple Graceful, but having double Graceful in a lot of instances is effectively similar. So they are pretty similar, so that makes sense. But yeah, it's always good to
and triple Duster as well.
Yep, triple Duster as well.
In certain decks.
Yep. But realistically, like, are people playing triple Duster, or are they playing more MSTs instead? Because I think MST is honestly better than Duster, in this format. But that's just my opinion. And
MST has more utility.
Yeah.
But Duster is basically free, is Raigeki for the back row, and that can be very effective in the right situations.
Yeah, but the issue is, like, it's Raigeki for back row, sure, but like the difference between Raigeki and like Duster is that you can set as much back row as you want per turn, whereas you can't normal summon as many monsters as you want per turn. So Raigeki is generally more powerful than Duster. Also, Duster's a lot more easy to play around because there are chainable back row, things like, Jar of Greed, for instance, which is very, very popular in these formats. You also run into IO. Imperial Order can stop a Duster. And you could say Imperial Order also stops a Raigeki too, which is very true. But the issue is, like, if you're going for the back row and they've got Imperial Order, they're going to just play into Duster more under IO, right? Like, if they've got IO, they can set a bunch of back row. And it's very obvious that they've got IO. And like, yeah, and as Ben L says, MST is better because it also stops IO too. So, yeah, I think it's a bit better. But, we just saw Harpies come down there and hit a Skull Lair, which is pretty good. And this is a pretty good position to be in for Danny there. Yeah, Joey-Pegasus does introduce Scapegoat, yes. And a fair amount of people are on it.
As well.
But, like, it's just a bit underpowered compared to a lot of the other staples that, the format introduced. So, it could definitely be experimented with more. But it is kind of an interesting card. It does stop Jinzo, and Jinzo is a house in Android, and likewise a house in Joey-Pegasus. But a lot of people just don't really play with it as much.
Scapegoat is more deck-centric. it's not played in BS. It's played more like Hayabusa, Exodia, things like that
Yeah.
instead of that.
Yeah, there are
You might
definitely
see Scapegoat
decks
in
that
a
play
side
Scapegoat
deck.
more than others. I mean, we have
Yeah,
seen it in some lists
yeah.
tonight, and I remember in the Dean duel versus Steph Curry, we saw it come up a couple times, and it was interesting to see it come up, but it didn't really do as much, I think, as it could have. I mean, it did. Well, I don't know. It did stall for a little bit, but eventually it didn't really stem the tide of aggression enough, I think, in either case. But oh, Ben Al had Scapegoat in the deck,
I
but never saw it in
don't
any of the
think
duels. Yeah,
anyone
I mean
plays.
that's the downside of playing like over
I don't.
40 is that you draw
Ooh.
into your spells and traps a lot at a lot lower rate than you would like, right? Like the good thing about playing over 40 is that you don't draw into duplicates of like manga as often, but the downside is like you're also just not drawing into as many of your power spells. So yeah, exactly. There's not enough conversions for meta or creature swap. Exactly, CS. And even when
Hayabusa
like
Knight as well
Metamorphosis
with
comes
Knight in
out,
his
and even
deck.
when Creature Swap comes out, like Scapegoat has not really seen the most retro play. And you could argue that like that's just because the decks haven't been experimented with enough. But I've definitely seen some experimentation in like Yada format with like the goat control style decks where like you go into Thousand Eyes off meta. But the issue is like without Tsukuyomi actually working the way it does in Goat and without it being even present in Yada format and stuff, it's just not quite as good as it otherwise would be. But it is definitely interesting. Yeah, Cannon Soldier can also be like 2,500 damage off a Scapegoat is pretty decent. So that is something to consider, but yeah, it's a bit weird. Okay, Reborn targeting Jinzo here, and it is Danny's Jinzo. So if they had called the Haunted, that would have been really good here, but unfortunately, it looks like they do not. So yeah, it's going to be pretty brutal. Dumptruck's also able to get out a Bazoo here, get in for 4,900. That is very much a two-turn clock and very, very brutal. Yeah, well, there's not really much of a downside. So I was gonna say the downside to going for 3 is like if you snatch the Bazoo, but if Danny snatched the Bazoo, they could just also buff it on their turn, so it doesn't really matter there. But yeah. Yeah, it was interesting that you got down like relatively low in the deck. So the odds of drawing Dark Hole were not the worst for you there, Benno. But yeah, it's just sometimes you don't draw it, and that is unfortunate. But as you said, like it's never over till it's over. You always can draw it. So I think that attitude is good to have with it. But yeah, Danny's getting defensive here, but it might not matter depending on what Dumptruck has. They're gonna bring out another Bazoo. And they're choosing to buff these up. I honestly don't think that buffing them up is the right choice. Yeah, okay, they're saying actually just one. Yeah, I don't think that buffing them up is the right choice because you can't break through here no matter what, right? Like, you know, if it's Cyberjar too, like you don't want to banish all your stuff and then not have them around anymore. So yeah, but they're going to hit in with the Bazoo. You do buff up one in case it's like Tomato, and it is indeed Tomato. So Tomato only has one Tomato left in deck to grab, and then that can grab like a Cannon Soldier at max to stave off damage, but it will likely grab a Witch instead. But we'll have to see. Oh, Dark Hole is in the side deck. Okay, that's interesting. I can see that when you're playing Momonga because you got a board state set up already. But I just think Dark Hole is just so powerful that you want it in main. But that will be going into siding there. So Dumptruck was able to just win off the back of Jinzo. Jinzo still very, very powerful, just like it is in Android. So let's dive into a Ratos versus Dean. Okay, it looks like Ratos has won the first match versus Dean. So, you know, we might be seeing another Ratos versus Dumptruck match for the finals yet again. The classic matchup. But I won't count out either Danny or Dean because they're both very, very good in these formats as well. So, yeah, so it really could go either way with either of these games here. So I'm excited to see what actually results. Okay, it looks like Dean versus Ratos is going to happen first. And Dean is going to be going first here because Ratos won game 1. So let's see what they do. They're going to go for Graceful there. Draw 3, pitch 2. That's a very good opener. Let's see if they go all the way. If they go Graceful, pot, you know, IO. They're going to go for Comfy, so that's still pretty good. Coffee ripping a card out of Aratos' hand. This is one of the other reasons why I think like double graceful is like, not necessarily as equalizing as you might think. Because like an argument that some people have when you have double graceful in a format, it's like, well, since you have 2 graceful, it's not like in GOAT where like one player draws graceful and like sacks, right? Because like with 2 graceful, both players are more likely to draw into it. And it's like, yes, that is true, but the person going first, if they draw into the graceful, they're also more likely to draw into the hand rips to then take away your opponent's graceful, just like what happened there. So it's not really as equalizing as you might expect. It's actually, I think, much more likely to lead to a big discrepancy in card advantage. So that's something to consider. It looks like Blood jumped out of the call. Yeah. So maybe they'll jump back in later. Maybe they won't. But yeah. Okay, they are indeed back in. Were you just having connection issues or?
Somehow got kicked out without realizing it. Oops.
Huh?
I ended up accidentally exiting from the voice channel. I don't know. How
Oh, okay. Yeah, that can happen. Discord can be a bit tricky sometimes, but Faith here for a spell. That's going to be really brutal for Aratos here. Wow. Just getting everything ripped apart here. Charity is going to draw 3 pitch 2 again. And yeah, it's just going to be, oof, look at the difference in cards on each player's side of the field. I mean, Dean still has to discard 2, but even beyond that, you got 5 versus 2. Not good odds.
And could have drawn Serpent.
Yep. But even if you don't draw a Serpent, you filter through so much of your deck that you're still in a really good spot. Like the quality of your cards is probably better than the average quality of Aratos' card off the top. And that's going to be a Serpent set. So at least Aratos will be able to get back that Serpent. But with the Kaiko on field, that's threatening to get rid of the Serpent if Aratos sets it again. So bit of an awkward spot to be in for sure. Now Aratos could draw another monster here for sure and set that to sort of like play around losing the Serpent. But they might also not be able to do that. And yeah, that's just going to be the end of the game. Yeah. just knowing what the writing was on the wall. Yeah, that's how it goes sometimes. But let's dive in to the other match here. So that one's going to game 3. Will Dump Truck versus Danny go to game 3 as well? And speaking of scapegoat, here's a scapegoat here. So it seems like what happened here was likely that Dump Truck activated Duo, Danny chained Io, and then Dump Truck chained Goat to that. That's what I assume happened. Because then they wouldn't all be engraved like that otherwise. Or Duo could have been activated first. Well, yeah, no, I think that's most likely the thing that happened. It's always fun sort of piecing together what might have happened earlier in the game when we jump in the middle of a match. That's always a bit of interesting detective work to see what happens. It looks like Dump Truck is going to preemptively fire this MST on Danny's MST, but then Io is going to come down to stop that MST from hitting this set, but then the MST is going to hit the Io. Oh boy, this is a long chain. That was wild. And it hits a snatch seal on top of that. So very, very interesting stuff there. Yeah, and now Dump Truck is sort of going without a back row. Danny's got 5 cards in hand, but Danny did, this is the secret win con is if you can get your opponent to lag out for 90 seconds, then that is one way to do it. But hopefully Danny gets back in here. It's always unfortunate when that happens. Especially because Danny is in a pretty good position here. So I think Danny could potentially take this one. Okay, there we go. Danny's back. Yeah. So the MST is going to hit that MST, clear away the board there. It's funny because there's an unlimited format that we've shown off on the channel in the past, which is PSV format, where you've got triple IO, triple call, triple a lot of things, honestly. And you often do run into these situations where you have like tons of MSTs coming down on tons of IOs, on tons of Dust Tornadoes. And it's like very reminiscent of that here. So that was cool to see. Bazoo coming down as well to clear the Elf. Now, will Danny go for all 3 and just leave 4 cards engraved? They might, just getting that extra damage. And it looks like they're going to go for 2. Will they go for the 3rd? They will indeed go for the 3rd. So that Bazoo is going to be buffed up to 2,500. And it's kind of tough to read from that what is going on here because this could mean that they don't have Skull Lair. It could also mean that they do have Skull Lair and are just fine with having exactly 4 engraved to pair with it. So we'll have to see exactly what they do here. Yeah, MST Wars, exactly. I love when a good MST War happens. And, speaking of spell and trap removal, there's a Harpies coming down there as well, hitting a Mirror Force. Very, very good. Yeah, if you send me the video after the stream, I can promote it on the, community tab, or I can throw it in the Discord. And feel free to share it in the Discord, by the way. Like, any retro content is fair game to sort of send around in the Discord.
Pretty much.
Yep.
Also, yeah, MST Wars, negate wars, because it negates everything.
Well, yeah, for people out there who are unaware, that was a joke. MST does not negate. Common misconception, but a classic one. And then a pre-mat coming down on the elf. I don't like that. I mean, I get why you do it if your opponent is a Kaiku. So if Danny brings out Kaiku, banishes both your monsters, the pre-mat is dead. But I don't like it because it loses to, it loses to Snatch, it loses to Bazoo. But I mean, I guess you could argue that, Snatch, you lose to that anyways, no matter what happens here.
Or that.
Yeah. So we'll have to see exactly what Dump Truck top decks here. There are some good top decks for them. I can get them out of this. But as is, this is a 2-turn clock. If Dump Truck doesn't draw a way to deal with this, then they are dead. Skull Lair coming down preemptively, just getting flipped up. I think that's smart. Just,
let's ask the question.
Might as well.
Doesn't MST stop continuous spells since they have to up on the field to activate to resolve their effects?
That is true, yes. But there's no cards in this format that actually really make that matter. Because the main continuous spells that would get played are like if you're going for a burn strategy with like Chain Energy. And Chain Energy, you still pay the 5 to activate the MST. I guess Burning Land, maybe? But Burning Land doesn't even... you don't really have any like continuous spells that really have like a trigger, or not a trigger effect, but like an effect that would be negated by MST. So, Swords does not flip. That's an option too. Yeah, Swords does not flip if it's MST in response to activation. So,
it has to resolve first, and MST activates before it resolves.
Yep.
So it gets destroyed because unlike other normal spells, it has to stay on the field.
Yeah, so it's like a continuous spell in that way. So that's probably the only really one that I can think of in this format where that would matter. Yeah, because there aren't any field spells that really do something on activation. There aren't... Yeah, so it would just be that. Like, continuous traps, it would also be able to stop continuous traps, but the only continuous traps that it would actually do that with, really, that you'd actually see being activated would be like Call the Haunted, which is like a pretty straightforward interaction. Skull Lair, but Skull Lair you can chain it to. Ultimate Offering you could chain it to as well, so it doesn't really matter there. But
end of the game.
Yep, and that will be a quick game too there as well.
Yeah.
Siding is glitched. Really there's been a couple glitches for DB here, I've noticed, especially with rematches. I've noticed the rematches have been glitched lately.
Swords has a really interesting history, even though CMO's portraying it wrong.
Well, I don't want to get negative about other, YouTubers here.
It's not negative. It's like, it is wrong.
I'm not going to dwell on that. But, it's definitely interesting to see how these cards develop over time and stuff. Luckily in the TCG, we don't really have to worry about that too much. Because, by the time it came to the TCG, it was pretty well and sorted. Not true for every card that comes over the TCG, but it was true for Swords relatively. So, yeah, I was just saying, you could just send them to me, Ben Online Games. So, yeah. Just send them to me, and I can do them on the community tab, or just send them in the Discord, too. But, yeah. And I can share them. Yeah, looks like this might be the end of the game for Dean here. Again, it's not quite over yet, but there aren't really many draws that Dean can get here to actually win the game. So, yep, that will indeed be the end of the game. Yeah, MST is not going to do it. We'll pop the tomato at least, but yeah, that's not going to do it there. So Ratos will be moving on to the finals there. Are we going to see a Ratos versus Dump Truck yet again? And that would be quite an intense match for the finals there. The two people at the top of the locals leaderboard going at it. So... Yeah. Elf coming down there. And let's see what happens here. Snatch coming down on the elf. So Dumptruck's able to get aggressive here. Going for 3k damage potentially. MST though coming down on the Snatch. That will deal with that. That is one of the downsides to Snatch. Is that I can stop that. But Jar drawn deeper into the deck to potentially run out to the elf. We'll have to see what they do here to deal with it further. Elf coming down, so Elf will be able to crash into Elf, then attack indirectly for 11. So that is pretty good. You preserve the Witch on field to potentially get a search for later to deal with whatever other beaters come your way. And yeah, you just get in for 11, and sometimes that chip damage is enough. But Danny likely does have a way to deal with the Witch, but it may not be a way that he's happy with.
Potentially.
Yeah. Well, that's what May means. We'll have to see what happens here, though. Yeah, it's definitely a tricky spot to be in because you also have to contend with Dumptruck's back row here. And the back row could be something like Trap Hole, which would obviously you don't want to play into. It could be something like Toronto's Tribute as well, with a Witch on field. Is also a bit awkward to play into. So, yeah, looks like they're just going to set one, set another. Will they set a monster in addition, or are they just gonna? Okay, they're gonna go for Bazoo. I wonder why they set two there first. In general, what you want to do is you want to hold as much information as possible in hand before actually going for a play like that, because, you know, your opponent still gets a search off the Witch. So, you know, if they know they don't have to play in the back row, or they might think that they don't have to play in the back row, then they might not, you know, play around that, for instance. Also, seeing what they search, you can sort of plan your turn a little bit better. Like if you have the read that they're not worried about back row, then they might have something that like Duster or something that you don't want to play into. So, you know, it's generally good to wait on that sort of thing. But, you know, definitely not guaranteed. Like, you don't need to do that. It's just something that's generally good to do. So MNC is going to hit a Call the Haunted here. And unfortunately, Dane's not going to be able to get any value off that Call the Haunted because you know, bring back Gemini Alpha will just get sent to graveyard immediately after anyways. So it's not like a Witch of Black Forge or a Sangan where, you know, it will then get popped, get a search, or a Jinzo where it will stick on field afterwards. So that Kaiku will attack into the Bazoo there, banish 2 from grave, banishing the Elf and the MST. 2 pretty good options because those are the ones that could potentially recur. Not many people are playing Mask of Darkness, so you don't really need to worry about that. And let's see what happens here. Oh, looks like Blah might have disconnected again. Duo is going to be pretty good for Danny. This can help them get back into the game a little bit depending on what they hit here. We'll have to see what they do. Huh?
I was trying to say the MST hit on the Call of Haunted's worse because now Danny doesn't have an immediate response to Kaiku. He can't just revive the Gemini Elf and has been banished as well.
Yeah. Although, you know, it is interesting because like the MST would hit the call anyways over the course of this, so it's kind of weird that way. I will be releasing some more Amsterdam videos, but I probably won't make an Inferno Tempest deck, unfortunately. And the reason why I'm not doing Inferno Tempest and why I'm also not really covering like, you know, agents or the normal strategy or something in Amsterdam itself is because Amsterdam is such a high-powered format, and it's a format that like it's not like well, it is an official format, but it's like it's too similar to Chaos to really, you know, give it its own tournament, in my opinion. So I'm not really going to spend too much time on it. Amsterdam is the format that I'm currently covering, where it's like it's Chaos format, but plus the cards from Ancient Sanctuary. So, you know, you do have releases from the movie pack, so you have things like Inferno Tempest, which is cool. You got the Sphinxes, which are cool. You got a bunch of cool strategies, but like the Reason Gate Turbo decks just like outclass pretty much any jank that you'd have. And things like, you know, regular Chaos deck, even a regular Chaos deck struggles against the Reason Gate Turbo decks. So it's just like jank decks just can't compete because the Reason Gate Turbo deck just goes so quick. So I'm not really going to feature too many of them there. I was originally going to feature them in the sort of hypothetical, you know, ban list format where it's like using the August 2004 ban list, where, you know, you actually institute the bans and see what happens there. But I think Reason Gate Turbo is honestly the best deck in that format too, and it's actually much worse in that format because there's not much counterplay to it. So what I'll probably do is I'll probably save them for like warrior format if I cover them. So yeah.
Ooh. Just
Yeah, and it won't be dominant for long after Amsterdam, which is why I'll cover them in like Warrior. So that's where like the jank stuff that was introduced in Ancient Sanctuary and the movie pack, that's where those will get featured.
yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm going to make an Inferno Tempest video specifically, because Inferno Tempest is a very, very tough strategy to pull off. There are things you can do with it with creature swap or with Lava Golem, but it's just very, very tricky to actually pull off and make work. So I'm not sure if I'm not gonna commit myself to doing an Inferno Tempest video, but it might be something that I'll do. I'm just not going to commit to it now. But yeah, I will be holding locals in Amsterdam format when we get to that. But yeah, it would be more of a what if tournament. So it's like, it's kind of like how we're doing what if tournaments for, we did Silly Snake as a locals, right? We're going to do an Amsterdam locals, but it won't be like a monthly tournament. Yeah, Ojama is definitely
Too
something you
high
can do.
powered.
Yeah,
Too
you
high
can.
powered, too fast,
What?
and it's too high powered. Though it's too high powered. It's too linear in its gameplay. It's kind of like you're either going to get scientist stuff, reasoning gate stuff. There's even an FTK OTK with just 3 DMOC. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly. And like the thing is like I think that Reading Gate Turbo is honestly the version is playing 3 Demox and is doing a regular Reason Gate Turbo combo deck. I think that's honestly the best version of the Demox stuff because it's the least bricky. It also it folds the least, I think, because the other ones fold to a lot of different interaction. But I figure, or not I figure, but in testing, the Reasoning Gate Turbo deck has been very flexible to a lot of different outcomes. And I feel like that is somewhat necessary for being like a top deck out there. So, based on testing, I'm pretty sure Reasoning Gate Turbo is the best of the sort of decks playing Triple DMOC and Monster Gate and things like that. But, I will be showing off a video also in Amsterdam format where I'll show off things like the Scientist deck, like the DMOC FDK where you use like Spell Economics and Mass Driver and, DMOC itself to pull off the combo. But, yeah, I think that for the hypothetical ban list format, I'm just going to probably show off the Reason Gate Turbo deck. Yeah, I think that's what I'll do. I might show off the Scientist deck as well in that format because Scientist is in a similar sort of situation to Reasoning Gate Turbo in that format. But again, I think the Reasoning Gate Turbo is a little bit better. Imperial Order actually does not have to be preemptively flipped. It's because like for something like Royal Oppression, right? Or in this case, like a Skull Lair. For something like that, it has an effect that you have to actually trigger yourself. Like you have to be like, okay, I'm going to do this thing and then get this outcome, right? Whereas Imperial Order just has a continuous effect to negate all spells. So continuous traps that have a continuous effect don't need to be preemptively flipped. This also applies to something like Dragon Capture Jar as well. Although that's kind of a weird case because like, realistically, like it's going to be switching on the defense. It's not like it's a trigger to switch to defense. It's just something that happens. But yeah, it doesn't have to be preemptively flipped.
Was never really meta.
Yeah, well that too. But I'm just bringing up an example like
cards.
mechanically. Like a mechanically similar card.
Also, yeah, Chaos won't be dominant for long after Amsterdam. Well, Chaos as envisioned in Chaos and Amsterdam ASD format won't be. But it's going to be evolving in Warrior.
Yeah. So, but it won't be like at tier 0 as it is. From what I've seen of Warrior. It definitely will. It'll be interesting there. Yeah, Stumbling is a fun card. Stumbling is really cool. Like, yeah, Dream Clown. Yeah, clown control stuff. Like, I used to play a lot of Reaper back when that was like more of a popular thing. And one of the coolest decks I saw in Reaper was someone actually brought Clown Control and they were playing Stumbling and they were doing things like reviving a Dream Clown off Call of the Haunted to then get Stumbling to switch to defense. And it was just really, really cool stuff. So yeah, Stumbling is such a cool card. I think it's fun. And Clown Control, it's just cool to see how long it can hang on. Unfortunately, it was a bit too underpowered to show off in Chaos format, and it will also be a bit too underpowered to show off in Amsterdam format. and maybe even a bit too underpowered in Warrior format. But we'll have to. It will make a reappearance at some point. Don't worry.
Maybe, maybe not. Like, you basically stacked your list of videos.
Well, the reason
For a
I say it
lot
will
of
make an
janky
appearance at some
Warrior
point is
formats.
because I want to show off the Reaper version of it, because that did top a tournament or two. So I think it'll be cool to show it off there. So it'll at least show up in Reaper. Now, Reaper is going to mainly just be Stein ODK nonsense. But yeah, I'll show up in Reaper at least. Maybe not outside of that, but like it'll be cool to see what happens. Yeah, it might show up in GOAT coverage as well. GOAT will be a bit different from how I cover a lot of my regular formats. And also, I'm gonna just say this now. We won't actually be holding a GOAT monthly tournament. And people might be a bit disappointed by that, but the reason I don't want to host a GOAT monthly tournament is because the tournaments that we host through the monthlies is stuff that don't really get hosted anywhere else. And so I want to make sure that those continue to be the case to give people an option to play something that they wouldn't otherwise be able to play. Whereas GOAT, there are tons of tournaments for that all the time. And, I could add another GOAT tournament and I'm sure people would join it. But I feel like it's just better to prioritize the formats that don't really see much play.
So in advance, that means you won't be getting Edison, Hat,
Yes.
or Tengu plants either.
Yes, for tournaments. I'll feature them on the channel, don't worry, but I'm not going to be
Obviously.
doing
I
them
think-
for tournaments.
Obviously, that's the monthly tournaments. Like in
Yeah.
advance, since GOAT is banned, you're not getting those three either in a monthly tournament.
Yes, I'm not going to be featuring, GOAT, Edison, or Tengu for the monthly tournaments. So yeah, and that will apply to any, any format where it's like there's a tournament being held at least once a month. Because if there's already being a tournament held that month, then I don't really feel the need to, saturate the market more with that when I could feature a format that has not had a tournament in like half a year, right? Or even longer. So, yeah. But it'll still be fun. I'll still explore GOAT, Edison, Tengu, etc. on the channel. And I got plans for that, which will be exciting to see. But that's just how it will be for the tournaments themselves. And I also, likewise, maybe there will be an exception here or there for the locals, but most of the time we're not going to feature the locals for like Edison, GOAT, Tengu Plant. That's the plan right now. Maybe because we're just doing the locals in sort of like the chronological order and stuff, and the locals are once a week as opposed to once a month. Maybe we'll do a GOAT locals, or maybe we'll do, Edison locals, etc. But right now the plan is not to do GOAT locals, not to do Edison locals, etc. So, but that can always change. We'll have to see what happens here. But that is what it is right now. This has been a very interesting game, by the way. Big aggressive pushes from Aratus early on to get Dump Truck down to 1100. And they're still in a very good spot. Like, Aratus is still, like, probably winning this game. But Dump Truck has managed to claw their way back a little bit here. And at least they're still alive, that is. And 800 life points is not much. You're dead to a Cannon Soldier, and the Witch Black Force there gives Aratos access to Cannon Soldier through a variety of means.
Oh.
But, this is just the end of the game, I think, right? Because Aratos crashes Witch into the Kaiku, and then just brings out Cannon Soldier and wins. So, yeah, they could just also hard draw the Cannon Soldier here.
That is true.
But,
Cannon Soldier's banished. Impossible.
Oh, it's banished. Oh, yeah, okay. Then that means that you don't have to worry about that. So, actually, that works out pretty well. And this is actually very a good play from Dump Truck, because if you had crashed into the Witch with the Kaiku earlier, then Aratus could have searched out a Gemini Elf. Somehow Gemini Elf hit over Kaiku and gotten in for game. But now they can't do that. So I think that was a very good play. Unfortunately, Double Graceful might have gotten them what they needed to actually, survive or kill Dump Truck here. So we'll have to see what happens exactly. But, the game's not over yet. Anything can happen. And that Kaiku's going to hit into the Bazoo there, get rid of that. And Dump Truck will set another pass back to Aratos there. That set could be the Sinister Serpent. It could be something else. We don't know at this point. Pot of Greed going to come down as well. And, Aratos is in a very, very good position. A lot of things that they can do here to win the game. They're going to bring out an Elf to hit over the Kaiku, try and hit into that set. But, it might not be the Serpent. Oh. It's indeed not the Serpent. It is a Mystic Tomato there. So Aratus is going to set one pass back to Dump Truck here. And this is I mean, it's not looking the best for Dump Truck, but it's not the worst either. There are some things that can get them out of this situation, but it is very tricky, and it's going to be tough to actually pull that off. They're going to set a jar, which is going to get sniped by Ratos for the MST, because they honestly just need to keep Dump Truck off as many cards as possible, but that Dark Hole should end the game there. And yeah, will indeed end the game, because Aratus gets to search off the Sangin and the Witch, and yeah, Aratus could, or Dump Truck probably is not playing Karibo, but if they were playing, I mean, if they had like Sangin or Witch set and they're playing Karibo, then that would have survived a little bit longer, but since they're likely not playing Karibo, if that was not a Sangin or Witch, they're dead anyways, but if it was, they're probably also dead, so yeah, but you just pass there, or you concede there just to not reveal the information what the set card is.
Pretty much.
But Dump Truck will be going first here, so they've got the sort of play here. So this could mean that they sort of get the snowball effect going on here this game and manage to win that way. Painful getting fired, very, very good after a pot. You can send the other hand rips here, plus some jars. You can send a bunch of stuff here, honestly. A lot of good options. I think it's get a little bit complicated if you are a Drew some of the hand rips or the jars, etc. But we'll see exactly what they send. They're going to send a Comfy and a Forceful. And what else are they going to send?
Honestly, if there's a format in the TCG before Stein starts running around where you could put Karibo on your side deck, this is it.
What, Stein? 3 Karibos. Oh,
Yeah,
3 Karibos.
basically.
Yeah. Well, it is kind of funny because like, you know, I always say that, but like realistically, I'm just bringing up an edge case because realistically, Karibo is going to be more of a brick than a savior, right? If you're in a situation where you need to search out a Karibo to survive, you're probably losing that game anyways. There are cases where it can save you and then you come back and win the game. But oftentimes that Karibo is going to just be a stopgap measure and you're going to lose the game anyways, which is why a lot of people don't play it. But it is very funny. And as you say, like meta can pair with it to bring it out like 1,000 eyes and, you know, suck up your opponent's thing. So that's good as well. So there are things you can do with it. Fiend decks can also play it to bring out Necrofear as well. So there are a couple things that, you know, can make Karibo come up. Also, you know, your opponent can maybe not overcommit into a lethal push and then they get punished for that. So there are a couple ways that Karibo can come up, but realistically, it's better not in the deck than in the deck. You really need like major OTKs to actually consider Karibo. And you know, this format does have OTKs, like, you know, there are the Hayabusa stuff. So maybe it's an option because of that, but we actually haven't seen any Hayabusa stuff in this locals tonight. I was expecting to see some Hayabusa decks in the locals, but no one brought any. So
I would have brought it, but I wanted to test Exodia.
Yeah.
And
Did Exodia work, or
I just lost to Danny through improbable circumstances.
did you pull off Exodia at all tonight, or?
I didn't get to, but
Okay.
in an earlier test I did.
Yeah, but
Like,
it's
game one. Yeah, game one, I just got decimated because I think food tool to be extremely aggressive.
well,
like
you know,
TP,
this format is a
knocks,
very
etc.
aggressive format, so it is good to keep that in
Yeah,
mind.
I
And
mean,
and
way
like,
more aggressive than
yeah, what matters
what
more
you'd
is like
expect.
whether you get it off in tournaments like this and events like this.
And duel
But
2, my entire strategy got ruined because I drew the head almost immediately.
well, that is a major
Like,
flaw with
early in the
Exodia.
duel.
You know, I actually mentioned this earlier in the
Yeah.
stream because someone asked about Exodia actually. And I said it can come up. You can turbo into the pieces, but if you lose the head, you're basically dead. And that is a flaw that you have to consider when playing the deck.
At least
But yeah,
for duel
it
1. Like
the
like in Silly
yeah,
Snake, you can
Karibo is
shift
it.
into the good stuff for duels 2 and 3 if you want to. Like, unlike with Silly Snake, where because of 3 charity, you'd be a
Well,
bit more comfortable going for Exodia if you're going first. In this format, no, don't.
well,
You don't have the speed.
so
You're
the
going
issue
for
with
the second.
Exodia too is that like you're realistically not getting it like FTK, right? You're not realistic. Like 2 charities good, but you know, to actually pull off the full Exodia FTK it's kind of hard. And so realistically, most of the time you're not pulling that off. So you've got to consider like that you will be in vulnerable spots with the head. And that is a major flaw of the deck, and people are naturally playing duo, Comfy, Forceful. So, you know, it's not like in Critter where they might not be playing card destructions or white magical hats or something like that. They are playing outs to Exodia in the main deck just because they're good cards. And so it is something to consider. And, you know, it is a flaw of the deck that you do have to consider if you do want to play it. But I do think it's interesting, like, as CS says, like, it also does partially depend on the meta of the group that you're playing with. Like, they mentioned that in their Yada locals, someone actually plays Machine OTK, and then Karibo is a great tool against that because, yeah, after they've activated limiter removal, and you go for the Karibo there, their monster will be destroyed at the end of the turn. So it's kind of funny because it's kind of like 2-for-1 play there. So it's kind of cool. So maybe if there's a test group that or people playing and they don't play the hand rips, then Exodia is a bit better. But in a tournament like this, or I mean, this isn't a super serious tournament, but like in like serious play, like people are going to play the hand rips, and that will always be an issue for Exodia.
So despite that, I do think Exodia is competitive in this format. No, it's not the best deck by any means, but it can win. You can get it, and I did come back against Food 2-1.
Did you win through Exodia?
It's not the best deck. What?
Did you win through the Exodia strategy?
I came back after losing the first duel, after siding, and just won the next 2 duels.
Yeah, that's after siding into a good stuff deck, right?
Yeah.
So I'd argue that isn't
the Exodia. That's just a part of it. You side into the BS stuff.
Yeah, okay, but
that's all
you understand that if you're saying that, oh, you can win if you side out of Exodia into the good stuff, then that's not necessarily a ringing endorsement for the Exodia part, right?
You're siding out of Exodia and Critter format too. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, but in Critter format, the Exodia combo is partially devastating because there's not as many ways for your opponent to deal with it, and because you can actually turbo into it a lot easier. Also, there are no hand rips. There's card destruction, white magical hat, but you have ways of dealing with white magical hat. And oftentimes Exodia decks do play a lot of negation to deal with like card destruction and things like that as well. And also in Critter, there's a lot more of a grind game, so you can actually grind your way to drawing the pieces or drawing the things you need to get the pieces. So the Critter and Joey-Pegasus are very, very different formats when it comes to Exodia. So
I'm not saying it's tier 1. I'm saying it's competitive. It's like,
so what do you mean by competitive?
You could win games. You might be able to top with it as well.
So I would say that the reason why I disagree with the topping part is because I think it's too inconsistent to actually top, because you have things like the hand rips, because, you know, the first turn player is going to go like double graceful hand rip, right? A lot of the time. And occasionally you'll have the head, occasionally you'll have other things to enable your combo, and those will get ripped out of your hand. So I think that, like, I think you're definitely right. It can win games, sure. But like, there's a lot of rogue decks that can win games. The point is, are they consistent enough to consistently win through their strategy in over the course of a lot of games? And I think for Exodia, while it is fun, and while you do have double graceful, so that's kind of neat with it, I think that there are just too many flaws of the deck to actually, you know, make it super competitive. Like, I think it could definitely be a fun rogue deck, but I don't think it's going to be topping tournaments all that often, or really at all. But I mean, that's my take on it from... Yeah, I mean, that's my take on it from both a theory perspective and also having played Exodia in Silly Snake format, where Silly Snake, you know, it's arguably the best it is in this era, and it still has some major issues there. So, yeah, I'm not...
It works.
Well,
that's all I can say.
Again, it works is still...
That's all I can say if that's all you're going to say.
Okay, well, again, it works is like, you know... it works in certain circumstances, sure, but so do YouTube combo decks that will never win a tournament, right? It's like, you have to be clear about what you're saying exactly, but, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it is what it is, but I do think that there are a variety of other jank decks in this format that actually can have a decent shot at competing. Like, for instance, we mentioned Hayabusa, and I do think Hayabusa has a decent shot because... and Ben Al brings a good point. Like, if you think Exodia is top tier, then definitely bring Exodia for next locals. The best way to sort of like argue your case is to, play it in these
Honestly,
locals
I
and
never
see
said
how
it's
it
top
does.
tier.
But
It's like tier
but
2 at best.
yeah. But yeah, and that goes for anyone out there who's like, damn, no one played this, but it's actually like a good deck. I think you should see play. Like definitely like bring these things to the locals, try them out. Like the best way to sort of see how they do is through testing, and the best way to test is through these locals or through the monthly tournaments. So I definitely encourage that as anyone out there is thinking about their own decks or thinking about maybe not even a deck that they're super passionate, but just a deck that they're like, I wonder how this would do. Just bring it and try it out. There's nothing to lose. Like these are all like very sort of fun, casual events, and so yeah, just bring it and see how it does. MST on Scapegoat, and we do get to see the interaction here. That is an important note. You can activate quick play spells the turn they are set this turn. In this format, this applies from like basically when quick play spells are introduced in Magic Ruler all the way to before Yada format. Yada format is where that ruling ends, but it is still cool to see it in action here. And the Scapegoat coming in clutch, and maybe that's why Dumptruck did not summon anything, because they were afraid of the MST on the Scapegoat. They wanted to pull the Scapegoat off, so that's kind of interesting.
Quick play ruling changes on August 12th, 2 days after Worlds, which is the Yada format we're playing. So technically,
Yada is the Worlds format where it uses the OCG rules. Yes. So in Yada format, the quick play spell rule works not with the
TCG list does not change until August 25th.
Yeah, are you talking about like Are you talking about the OCG version, or are you talking about the form of Yada that we actually play, or TCG Yada?
You're saying it changes there, but they didn't actually change it immediately. They changed it 2 days later while it was still fiber format, because there's a period in fiber format from the 12th to the 24th where you have to play with the quick play rules as we have them today if you play in that.
Yeah, but fiber format's centered around the period where you can use quick play spells as they originally were. So yeah, and that's just how people play fiber. I mean, there definitely is.
Yes, I'm saying you can play that way because that's when they changed it. That's like considered like a side format. We don't play it, but it does exist.
Oh yeah, you could definitely make a format out of that and have people play that instead. But the way that people play fiber is with the quick play rules as they are in this format, as they are since their introduction. So it's just good to be clear about this because I don't want people watching the stream and then going to play in the upcoming fiber tournaments that will happen, and being like, oh, well, why can you use quick play spells the turn they're set? So it's good to be clear about this and not sort of mix people up by accident. But yeah, this is a very interesting game state. Aratos, they've got a Serpent in hand, so that's one card accounted for. Other than that, they've got basically 4 live cards, the which can get them into another card as well. But Dumptruck also has 4 live cards here. So it's kind of more even than you'd expect after the start that Aratos had. So very interesting to see here, for sure. And that's another thing about the hand rips, too. Like, Comfy and Forceful, I do think Comfy and Forceful are the best hand rips. But in terms of, like, pure card advantage, they are 1-for-1s. And that 1-for-1 trade, like, you also get the information from them, and you take the best card out of your opponent's hand. So it's still very, very good, and very brutal to be hand ripped. But it does enable you to come back more than you might expect because you aren't too far down on card advantage from them. Duo is the card advantage hand rip where it puts you +1. But with Serpent running around in this format, Duo is a bit worse. And if you do Duo your opponent and then they do have the Serpent, then that is, of course, really unfortunate for you. And can nullify that card advantage. So it is interesting. Like, I've noticed a lot of people, and this applies to a lot of formats with the hand rips, a lot of people are just, very quick to judge them because there are 3 hand rips running around. But a lot of the time in these formats, like, it's not as bad as you might expect. This is going to be a brutal turn for Dumptruck here. So yeah, Dump Truck's going to lose 2,800 after that Bazoo banished on Aratus side of the field. And also they're going to lose 500 from the Cannon Soldier. Now, will Aratus also tribute off the Witch and get a search off that? Or tribute even the Cannon Soldier itself, because that way you don't play into things like Mystic Tomato crash into Cannon Soldier. There are a couple different options here that they could go for, and they are indeed going to tribute off the Cannon Soldier to play around the Mystic Tomato or the Giant Rat. Well, I think Dump Truck's on Mystic Tomato, but I think that was the correct play. Just you play around the recruiters. Gemini Alpha is going to get over that Witch here. This will allow Aratos to search out a Bazoo of their own if they do have another copy of Bazoo in the deck. Some players only play one Bazoo, though, so we'll have to see if they play more than that. We probably, I mean, I forget if in game 2 or 1, Aratos shut off more than one Bazoo in their deck. But we'll have to see if they've got one. They're going to go for Tomato here. So that could either mean they already have a Bazoo in hand, or they just don't have another Bazoo in deck, or they want the field presence from Tomato, and they know that Dump Truck might have a way to deal with a Bazoo summon. So a lot of options here. Why only one Bazoo? Because Bazoo takes some setup in the graveyard, so it's a bit less good in the early game. Because if you bring up Bazoo and it's just like, oh, I don't have any cards in grave, then it just loses to like Gemini Elf. It already loses to Kaiku, so that's kind of unfortunate. I personally like more than one Bazoo. I always play at least 2 Bazoo in these formats because I think it's good having the extra copy. And with the ability to banish anything from grave, it's not as dead as you might expect early game. But some people only play one just to sort of maximize their consistency in the early game. It's kind of like, you know, the concept in Magic the Gathering where it's like you want the mana curve to go well for you. So basically you want to, you know, basically keep playing lands to increase the amount of mana you have, and you want to keep having cards in hand that go with the exact mana that you have on field. So that way you can maximize your mana use every turn with what you want to do, right? It's kind of similar to this, where like, oh, and that will be the end of the game with a Kaiku coming down here. Yeah, that's going to be the end of the game, and Aratos will reclaim the top spot on the locals leaderboard. Iconic matchup, though. It'll be cool to see if these two face off again in the next one. But very cool stuff here. And I think that, you know, we got to see some very interesting games in Joey-Pegasus. I will say, we didn't get to see many, you know, spicy jank builds. We did see some spice, don't get me wrong. But I'm definitely expecting a bit more spice than we actually saw here. I was expecting like, you know, like, whatchamacallit, Hayabusa OTK. I'm expecting some other stuff too. But very, very good stuff.
Surprising Hayabusa didn't show up.
Yeah, I know. That's I was shocked by that.
There's a deck that's actually.
Yeah, at some point, I believe you'll make it to the finals, Ben L.
It's a contentious thing about it being either tier 1 or tier 2, even though you don't think so. Like,
well, I think it's at least tier 2.
That might have shown up, and
I think it's at least tier 2. I'm not sure if it's consistent enough to make it to tier 1, but it's definitely tier 2 at least. But it's a cool deck, and I think like one of the reasons to play Joey-Pegasus is because decks like that can potentially be a little bit more consistent than they would be in other formats. So I know that a lot of people like formats like this because they get to play decks like that, and so it'll be cool to see if people play that in the future. I'm not sure if. Okay, looks like we do have Aratos here in the call. Congratulations on reclaiming the locals, the top of the locals leaderboard. So what were your thoughts on Joey-Pegasus format in this locals? Like, we saw a lot of standard decks getting played here. Do you think that standard decks are the way to go in this format, or do you think that maybe some jank could shine through in the future?
I mean, I'd say just the standard deck. I don't really know what rogue deck could compete.
Yeah, and I sort of fall under similar lines. Like, Hayabusa's done okay in the past, but I feel like the standard deck just seems so consistent because you draw like so many good cards all the time, and you have so much flexibility in how you structure your plays.
I mean, I will say I think that like a jank deck has a better chance in this format than an android because of the 2 graceful. Now, like the standard deck does also get the 2 graceful, but it's just higher variance overall.
Yeah, and I think that is really the reason to play this format if you want to play it over Android, is because, you know, jank decks are a bit better in this format. Now, whether they are top tier is another question, but they are a bit better, so it's good to keep in mind. And we also have Dump Truck here as well. So, you know, we got the classic match of Dump Truck versus Ratos for the top of the leaderboard here. So very exciting. And Dump Truck, it seemed like you were on a bit of a standard deck as well. But what were your thoughts going into this game, taking on the other champ here?
Not many thoughts. Just trying to stay calm.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that you two will wind up in finals again at some point. Because it seems like, you know, that the top of the leaderboard is very contentious between you two. But I'm sure that other people will rise up in the future to scale the heights and threaten the titans at the top. But for now, yeah, you two are the top of the leaderboard. So good stuff. So I asked Aratos this, but what are your thoughts on the format as well?
I was surprised at how much field presence still matters. It's very Android-like in that sense, even though we've got some, you know, fancy new toys to work with. Yeah, the field is still so important here.
Yeah. And now, I think Aratus, you might have answered this when you were talking about just how rogue decks can compete or not. But would you prefer this to Android, or do you think that Android's the better version of this format?
Android is definitely better.
I think Android's better as well, yeah.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, like, the Graceful, it's not just, like, Graceful itself. Like, when you go first and have Graceful, your chance of finding, like, a hand rip or an Imperial Order, they go through the roof.
Yeah. And that I sort of mentioned that earlier in stream, too, because I said, like, that, you know, people sometimes think, oh, double Graceful is a bit of an equalizer because both players are more likely to draw into it. So unlike in GOAT format, for instance, where it's just a one of that you might draw and the other player might not, at least both players have more of a chance to draw into it. But the issue is that the person going first can then draw into their hand rips, all the IOs, all that stuff, and basically lock the other player out of playing the Gracefuls. So it's much less equalizing than it may seem. But, you know, I think it's nice that we get to sort of use the locals to show off these formats, though, because, I mean, I feel a certain way about these formats, and I know a lot of people feel that way as well. But there are people out there who do enjoy Joey-Pegasus more than Android. And I think it's good to sort of provide something for them to play as well in these locals. And yeah, I think there are also other communities for Joey-Pegasus as well. And hopefully those continue to grow if more people like what they see here. So if anyone out there is watching these and wants to join in playing Joey-Pegasus or any of the locals in the future, definitely head on over to the YGO from Zero Discord server. Link is in the description of the video. And also, if you like this style of gameplay, be sure to come back tomorrow, noon EST. We're going to be streaming the Android finals. We held a monthly tournament in Android this month, and it looks like the finals will be a really fun match between two great duelists. So it should be a lot of fun. So stay tuned for that. And yeah, it should be a blast. But anything that y'all want to say before I sign off here?
Scapegoat needs more testing.
I guess I should have said people to do it in a specific order. But yeah, Scapegoat, I think, is a very interesting card in this format. And yeah, it'll be cool to see where it goes from here, because I do think it does stop Jinzo, which is very nice. However, do you want to play it over some of the other cards that you might play in the deck? That's a bit debatable, but it really is a very interesting card, and one that definitely does need more testing for sure. But
okay,
yeah.
About Android and Joey-Pegasus, like Eratos and Dump Truck said, for most players, Android is the preferred format because of the two cherries and all of that. But like, if let's call Joey-Pegasus a guilty pleasure and leave it at that.
Yeah, and I think that's fine to have guilty pleasure formats like that. And even if it's your main pleasure, I think that's also fine. Like, I always try and just have these formats out there for anyone who might enjoy them, because people definitely enjoy the game differently. And if this is up your alley, definitely check out the Discord, check out my other videos on this format, and definitely play some games, because there are people out there who also want to play this format and will be happy to play with you. And it's really great. So I'm going to call it there, though, because we will be streaming tomorrow. I also have a video that will be coming out in between the two streams, so look forward to that in Amsterdam format. Should be a lot of fun. But that's going to do it for this video. So I hope you all enjoyed. As always, please be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content. It really helps grow the channel more and makes these locals even bigger, makes the monthly tournaments even bigger, makes the community bigger, and I think that's always a good thing. But I hope that you all enjoyed as always. And until next time, I've been Ben from YGR from Zero, and I'm signing off. Okay.